The ET alien contact and tragic event of this humanoid that took place in 1955 Sweden. UFO Insight, Marcus Loth, writes about this event of the tragic death of an alien humanoid. He says, we've examined several cases of humanoid entities and apparent connections to UFO sightings previously, and most encounters are brief and involve a quick conversation before the respective humanoids then go on their way, leaving those behind awestruck and mystified of this. But an incident that took place in the summer of 1955 in Sweden is perhaps one of the strangest and most intriguing encounters on record, not least as it resulted in the death of this humanoid, this extraterrestrial that was involved, and ultimately the discreet disposal of his body by witnesses upon his strict instructions before he died. He told them how to dispose of him. Now, what is also intriguing about this encounter, if we accept its credibility, that is, because we don't know how credible this is or not, is that, because there's no evidence, is that much of the information passed to the witness by the humanoid endorses many aspects of the ancient asteroid theory. It also backs up many details that surface in other similar incidences. It's an incident that we should perhaps take with a cautious pinch of salt, because it could be a tall tale, that is, he wants to say, but one that we should at the very least give the benefit of the doubt to for the time being. The account enters the public arena through Ed Komarek, who would urge the readers of his blog to copy and distribute freely, he said. It appears that Komarek would come across the story while researching UFO and alien humanoid material, and specifically the article titled Humanoid Dies in Sweden by John Fontaine. In fact, before we get to the account, we have to examine how Fontaine himself obtained this information. An intriguing gentleman with an unusually intense interest. According to the article mentioned above, Fontaine was at an exhibition named Love and Chaos in Charlottenburg in Copenhagen in Sweden, and was attracting several hundred people every day to listen to lectures and view pictures of UFOs and aliens. On this particular morning, the date is uncertain, but appears to be around the late 1980s or early 1990s, with a packed lecture hall with several groups of school children also in attendance. Fontaine noticed that one particular gentleman from the crowd. He was around 60 years old and appeared to pay particular attention to the section of the lecture speaking about humanoids. Fontaine would watch the lecture several times, as did the strange man, and each time they would get to the humanoid part, he would visibly become more attentive. Fontaine sensed something of intrigue about the man and eventually walked over to him. After introducing himself, the pair began to talk. The conversation was nothing more than polite small talk to begin with. However, after gaining his trust by demonstrating he was taking seriously what he was speaking about, the mystery man began to speak more openly, and more specifically about why he had such an interest in the humanoid section of the lecture. So in depth was the account that he would relay that an hour passed by before either of them had realized it, and the alleged incident is as outlandish as it is interesting. A light so bright the sunlight almost disappeared. The mysterious man would claim the incident would take place in July 1955. At the time, he was working as a lumberjack in the Gulf of Bothnia region. On this particular morning around 6 a.m., as he and two other lumberjacks were cutting trees, they suddenly noticed a strange sound. It appeared as though a big animal was thrashing its way through the woodland around them. The men would look around them, unnerved but alert, and seconds later they would see a cigar-shaped object moving in and out of the trees in a haphazard way. The main witness would recall how he had first believed he was witnessing a small airplane which had lost its wings. One thing was perfectly obvious, though, that was, whatever it was attempting to make an emergency landing. As the men scanned the area, it became apparent that the strange aerial vehicle was heading in the direction of a river about 500 yards away. And they followed the aircraft as best they could. Several seconds later, it seemed crashed onto the ground a short distance from the water. And that was when an already strange incident turned out even stranger. Instead of hearing an almighty deafening crash, the group instead heard nothing but complete silence. Instead, quote, a gigantic flash of light engulfed the whole area, end quote. Even more bizarre, it appeared to the men, such was the brightness that the sunlight almost disappeared. In fact, the witness would recall, so strange and surreal were those few seconds that they could see through the trees as if they were on an X-ray machine, and then a vacuum wave appeared and pulled everything towards the center of the light. And they said that the normal sounds of the forest had also disappeared. As the three men watched this bizarre incident unfold, they had to hold their balance to prevent from being pulled into the strange light, and as they did so, the leaves and even branches would fly past them towards the strange pool of light. The witness would recall how the normal sound of the forest had stopped during this bizarre incident, an incident like that likely, he would further recall, lasted perhaps only a fraction of a second. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the intense brightness was gone. The three men looked a moment to gather themselves before heading out to the area the light had come from. However, much to their amazement, there was no sign of any wreckage whatsoever. The men began to go about their duties once more. However, before they could do so, one of them suddenly spotted something strange. He would call out to the others, "Here's a dwarf dressed in uniform." The trio quickly came to the realization that the dwarf, quote-unquote, was the pilot of the aircraft that had seemingly crashed into the water after all. The pilot, however, had seemingly managed to escape the doomed vehicle before it crashed. The light, it appears, was some kind of ejector technology. The three men gathered around the body of the strange humanoid. "Don't touch me, it will only bring you difficulties," he said. They would later estimate the apparently lifeless figure was no more than about 4 feet tall, and what's more, around his body, a white light vibrated like a halo. Each of them believed this strange being to be dead. However, one of them reached to touch the humanoid. He suddenly came to and moved away from them. Even stranger, in perfect Swedish, he would warn them with a scream, "Don't touch me, it will only bring you difficulties." This is indeed a strange and intriguing statement, perhaps even stranger, after allowing the three men to stare for several moments to allow their minds to contemplate the situation they found themselves in the humanoid, the humanoid stated, "Now you know who I am." The witness would recall how at this time they all seemed to sense a great calm come over them. As they now studied the strange humanoid with a clear mind, it was equally clear to the trio that he was no dwarf. He was very well built with broad shoulders. He would further recall how his skin had a yellowish quality to it, perhaps even stranger and intriguing to UFO and alien researchers was that his eyes were deep-socketed and black without any white around them. "Internally, I am destroyed," he said. The men also noticed how beat up, bruised, and wounded the humanoid was. Although he might have escaped the crash into cold waters, he apparently had not escaped the impact with the ground, at least not completely. They noticed how he repeatedly tried to smile at them, as though trying to reassure them he was okay. However, it became evident to all of them that he was far from that. As they continued to take in details of the strange humanoid's appearance, they noticed how his uniform was of a reddish metal, and what's more, it appeared glued to his body. Only his head and hands were uncovered from the strange, clinging material. Again, this detail is perhaps of interest to us. It certainly surfaces in many such close contact reports. As the main witness looked at the humanoid's feet, he noticed how the shoes were ribbed and vibrated, so much so that he immediately imagined caterpillars on a tank. At the same time, as this thought went through his mind, the humanoid nodded at him discreetly as if confirming his thought. The footwear could assist him in moving forward and backwards without moving his feet. Yet another detail that shows up often in other UFO and humanoid encounters is the fact that the being had a shiny belt around his waist, and what's more, this belt had a particularly large glowing buckle, as if it was more of a device than a mere clipping mechanism. As the figure noticed the men watching, he would deliver the news that he was in fact fatally hurt. He would state to the men, quote, "It is because of the clothing I can stay with you a while. Internally, I am destroyed," end quote. A cosmic conversation that lasted for 2 hours. As he informed them of his unfortunate and imminent fate, he pulled a rectangular device from the pocket at the side of his clothing. He appeared to manipulate and press several buttons on it, and then threw it several yards away from them. Sensing that the men were about to walk over to the device to examine it, the humanoid shouted, "Don't touch it." He would further state that he had said it so that his colleagues don't come looking for me, quote unquote. As this was taking place, the witnesses noticed that the humanoid was in great pain. He would clasp his hands together at times, appearing as though he was asleep. As he continued to watch over the entity, the witness suddenly noticed that the two other men had suddenly retreated back into the forest. By the way, they did so almost in unison with each other. He had the feeling that their sudden joint decision was placed in their minds by the dying visitor. When they had left, the humanoid would speak with the witness for about 2 hours. While we will examine some of the contents of this conversation shortly, the witness would refuse to reveal the majority of the details to Fontaine. Following the conversation, the humanoid gave a strange bag to the witness. He would claim that following his death, he and the other two men should place him inside it. Following this, they should then carry him to the river, and once there, he would disappear. Even more important, they must then wash themselves thoroughly to ensure they did not get ill. More evidence of a cosmic deity? After issuing these instructions, the witness could see that the humanoid was close to death. His breathing became increasingly heavy, and the halo that had previously glowed brightly was now darkening rapidly. Perhaps even more bizarre, certainly for studies in the extraterrestrial field, is that the witness sensed the humanoid was saying something akin to a prayer quietly to himself in his final moments. This is something, however, that has surfaced several times in other UFO and close contact reports. And perhaps one of the most well-known is that of Sidney Patrick, who in the late 1960s claimed to have gone on board an alien craft with an entity named Zeno, who would inform Patrick of a supreme deity to whom they paid their respects. And following the humanoid's death, the witnesses and the other two men did as he instructed. The bag itself had a strong smell of sulfur, and more alarming to them, the bag appeared to burn their hands as if they were raw flesh. As soon as the bag touched the water, the strange bubbling began around it. The witness realized that some chemical process was taking place. Barely 5 minutes later, nothing remained of the bag or the humanoid. The witness would claim to Fontaine that the three men barely ever spoke about the incident, despite working together for several years after that. However, he would think of the incident each day. And what's more, the humanoid looked exactly the same as the entity in the slide at the exhibition. And then the witness revealed one more piece of remarkable information. A credible encounter from a mysterious gentleman. From out of his pocket he produced a small piece of metal. He would claim that several days after the crash he had discreetly returned to the site and discovered the small piece of metal on the ground. By the way it shined, he knew it was a piece of the humanoid's craft. He had, claimed, held on to it as proof, if only to himself, of the encounter. And with that, the gentleman got up and left, disappearing into the crowd within a matter of seconds. It would appear, at least according to Fontaine, that the gentleman was more than credible, not least as he had held on to the secret for so long, and even when he did tell of it, he did so anonymously and for no financial reward. Although he didn't discuss the contents of their conversation in detail, some aspect of it were told to Fontaine. For example, the humanoid would claim he came from a constellation we call the Eagle. And what's more, he would claim that several alien races have and still do visit the Earth, and have done so for centuries. Even more intriguing, some of these races keep a permanent surveillance on humanity. Others, as we have seen in several humanoid encounters, would take samples of soil, atmosphere, and foodstuffs, and did so with a view to settling on the planet at a future date. Perhaps most intriguing of all, however, was the assertions that some of these creatures we understand to be aliens are in fact advanced entities that materialize and dematerialize from a parallel universe which orbits the Earth. Questions and mysteries in abundance. Of course, to anyone who researches UFO and alien contact, such details are suggestive of a basic truth in the ancient astronaut theory, that extraterrestrial entities have somehow been involved in human affairs since antiquity. Furthermore, details of several different alien races visiting the Earth has been offered by such people as the former Canadian Defence Minister Paul Hellyer. He believes, based on evidence he has seen firsthand, that anywhere from 4 to 12 different alien races regularly visit the Earth, and they do so for a variety of reasons. Perhaps one of the biggest mysteries of the encounter is what agenda the humanoids race of aliens are working towards. Were they here for humanity's benefit? The actions of the stricken extraterrestrial in this instance would certainly not suggest a malevolent agenda. Like other similar encounters, proof is hard to come by, and we consequently have to rely on our own judgment as to the authenticity of such claims, and in the process, we must mentally log and file such incidents. For we never know when they may suddenly become of importance, especially as the ever-increasing barrage of information comes forth for us to examine and work through. This is by Marcus Loth. It's on UFO Sighting, and it's on Nexus Newsfeed. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.